He went undercover to inspect his restaurant, but one injured waitress exposed a truth he never expected. Daniel Carter owned one of the most successful restaurant chains in the city, but no one inside this small downtown location knew that. That morning he walked in wearing old jeans, a faded hoodie, and a baseball cap pulled low. To everyone else, he looked like just another customer, quiet, observant, invisible. Daniel had come undercover. Complaints had reached his office about poor management and staff mistreatment. He wanted the truth, not filtered reports. As he sat in a corner booth, his eyes scanned the room. That's when he noticed her. A young black waitress moved between tables with practiced grace, balancing trays effortlessly. Despite her right hand being clearly injured, two fingers were taped together. Swollen, bruised, and yet she never slowed down. Her name tag read Aaliyah. Watched closely as Aaliyah poured drinks, smiled politely, and apologized for delays that weren't her fault. When a customer snapped at her, she lowered her head and said softly, "I'm sorry, sir," even though she had done nothing wrong. When she reached Daniel's table, he noticed the pain in her eyes, carefully hidden behind professionalism. "Your hand," Daniel said gently. "Is it broken?" Aaliyah hesitated. "Just a small injury," she replied quickly. "I'm fine." Daniel knew better. He'd broken enough bones in his younger years to recognize the signs. Moments later, the floor manager stormed over. "Why are you standing around talking?" he barked at her. "Move." Aaliyah flinched and obeyed. Daniel's jaw tightened. Daniel ordered a second cup of coffee he didn't intend to drink, then a third, letting it cool untouched as he stayed seated longer than any customer reasonably should, his instincts buzzing in a way they hadn't in years, the kind of quiet internal alarm that told him something was wrong even before he could name it. From his corner table, he began to notice patterns that hadn't stood out before. Aaliyah was always moving faster than everyone else, yet she was never allowed to slow down. While other servers carried 2 plates, she balanced 4. When someone dropped a fork or spilled a drink, the manager laughed it off. But when Aaliyah's tray tilted even slightly, his face hardened, his voice sharp enough to cut through the noise of the restaurant. Daniel watched her shoulders tense every time that man passed behind her, watched how she instinctively shifted to make herself smaller, as if hopping to disappear into the walls. The other servers avoided eye contact when the manager approached, some subtly stepping closer to Aaliyah, others drifting away as if proximity alone could get them burned. There were whispers too, barely audible over the hum of conversations and clinking dishes, warnings disguised as jokes, quick murmurs of "careful," and "not now," when the manager's footsteps echoed across the floor. Daniel's jaw tightened as he tracked every interaction, every uneven distribution of work, every unnecessary criticism aimed in one direction only. When Aaliyah finally slipped into the narrow space near the kitchen for a brief break, rubbing her hand as if it ached, Daniel leaned back in his chair, pretending to scroll his phone while angling his ear toward the doorway. That's when he heard the raised voices, raw and ugly, stripped of the polite mask worn out front. "You think I care about your finger?" the manager snapped, his tone dripping with contempt, not concern. "You miss a shift, you're fired. Simple." There was a pause, heavy and suffocating, before Aaliyah answered, her voice shaking despite her effort to keep it steady. "I just needed one day to see a doctor." The response came immediately, colder than before. "Then you should have thought about that before being replaceable." Daniel felt his hands curl into fists, so tight his knuckles ached, memories surfacing of power misused, of authority weaponized against those with no leverage to fight back. He watched as Aaliyah emerged moments later, face carefully neutral, eyes dulled in a way that spoke of exhaustion far deeper than a long shift. She went straight back to work, no complaint, no hesitation, carrying even more than before, as if trying to prove something that should never have needed proving. Daniel's appetite vanished completely. This wasn't just poor leadership or a stressful workplace. This was intimidation, exploitation, and calculated cruelty dressed up as management. And as he sat there, watching Aaliyah navigate the floor like someone walking through a minefield, Daniel knew with absolute clarity that he couldn't just walk away. Something didn't add up, and he had seen enough to know this situation wasn't going to fix itself unless someone stepped in. When Aaliyah returned to Daniel's table with his untouched coffee, her movements were careful, almost rehearsed, as if every step had been calculated to avoid drawing attention, and Daniel noticed how she favored one hand despite trying to hide it, the stiffness in her fingers betraying pain she had long ago learned to swallow. He lowered his voice, keeping his tone calm and unthreatening, and asked, "How did you break your finger?" The question hung between them like a fragile object that might shatter if handled carelessly. Aaliyah froze for a heartbeat, her eyes flicking instinctively toward the manager's office, then toward the kitchen doors, then across the dining room to see who might be listening. For a moment, Daniel thought she wouldn't answer at all, that fear would win the way it so often did in places like this, but finally she exhaled and leaned in just enough for him to hear. "An order rack fell in the kitchen last week," she said quietly, the words tumbling out faster as if once started they couldn't be stopped. "It wasn't secured properly. I reported it right away." She paused, her jaw tightening. "They told me to keep working. No incident report, no medical help. They wrapped it with tape and said I'd be fine." Daniel felt something cold and heavy settle in his chest, a familiar anger that came not from surprise but from recognition, because he had seen this before in different uniforms and different buildings, the same pattern repeating itself wherever power went unchecked. He asked another question, even more softly than before, "And if you stop working?" Aaliyah's shoulders sagged slightly, as if the weight she carried all day had suddenly doubled. "They said they'd report me for job abandonment," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the clatter of dishes. "They said if I caused trouble, they'd make sure no one else in the area hired me. I help support my younger brother. He's still in school. I can't lose this job." In that moment, the entire picture snapped into focus for Daniel with brutal clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a one-time mistake. This was a system built on fear, on making people believe they were disposable, on keeping them silent by reminding them of everything they stood to lose. He saw it in the way Aaliyah avoided eye contact now, in the way her fingers trembled as she set down the check, in the way she flinched when someone laughed too loudly nearby. Fear had trained her well. Exploitation had taught her the rules. Silence had become her armor. Daniel reached for his wallet, his movements deliberate, his expression unreadable, and as he paid the bill he felt the last trace of doubt evaporate. He stood up slowly, meeting Aaliyah's eyes, and for the first time since they'd spoken, he let a note of certainty enter his voice. "Thank you, Aaliyah," he said. "You won't regret today." Confusion flickered across her face, mixed with something else she didn't dare name, perhaps hope or perhaps worry, and before she could ask what he meant, Daniel turned and walked toward the exit. As the door closed behind him and the noise of the restaurant faded, he already knew this conversation would not end where it began, because the truth had come out, and once truth was spoken aloud, it had a way of demanding action whether anyone was ready for it or not. The alarm on Aaliyah's phone never got the chance to ring. At 5:47 a.m., a sharp message from the restaurant group chat had already sliced through the silence of her tiny bedroom. "All staff mandatory meeting, 6:30 sharp, restaurant closed until further notice, no exceptions." She stared at the screen, heart thudding unevenly. Closed, on a Wednesday, the only time the place had ever shut during the week was when the refrigeration unit exploded 2 summers ago. Something was wrong, seriously wrong. Her right hand throbbed in protest as she pulled on her black uniform polo. The cheap polyester fabric caught on the fresh bandage she'd wrapped around her index and middle fingers last night. The fracture was only 48 hours old, but the pain already felt like it had lived inside her for years. She flexed her fingers experimentally and winced. The bone grated somewhere deep inside. Still, she couldn't afford to call in sick. Not again, not after yesterday. By 6:25, the restaurant smelled of industrial cleaner and fear. Every employee was already there, 23 of them crammed between the hostess stand and the bar. The morning light slanted through the still-closed blinds, painting thin gold bars across the tile floor. No one spoke above a whisper. The usual clatter of pans, the hiss of the espresso machine, the shouted orders, gone. In their place was an unnatural hush, broken only by the occasional cough or shuffle of sneakers. Aaliyah stood near the back, half hidden behind the tall frame of Imran, the senior line cook. She kept her injured hand tucked against her stomach, cradled by her left arm like a wounded bird. Her eyes darted toward the double doors every few seconds. She didn't know what she expected: health inspectors, police, maybe even reporters, but nothing prepared her for what actually happened. At 6:32, the front doors swung open with a soft hydraulic sigh. A man stepped inside. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing a charcoal suit that looked like it cost more than Aaliyah's entire monthly rent. The fabric caught the light and shimmered faintly, expensive wool, perfectly tailored. His shoes were polished oxblood leather, his watch caught a brief flare of sunlight and threw it across the wall like a signal flare. But it was his face that made the room freeze. It was him. The same man who had sat alone in booth 14 yesterday in a faded hoodie and cheap baseball cap. The same man who had ordered black coffee and a plain omelette. The same man who had watched, quietly, intently, while Aaliyah was screamed at, humiliated, and ordered to keep working with tears streaming down her face and a broken finger cradled against her apron. Gasps rippled through the group like wind across water. Someone behind Aaliyah whispered, "No way." The manager, Mr. Farouk, went from pink to bone white in under 3 seconds. His clipboard slipped from his fingers and clattered to the floor. The sound was deafening in the sudden silence. The man in the suit stopped just inside the entrance. He surveyed the room slowly, deliberately, the way a general might look over a battlefield he had already decided to conquer. Then he spoke. "My name is Daniel Carter." His voice was calm, measured, carrying easily to every corner of the restaurant. "I own this company." The words landed like a stun grenade. For perhaps 5 full seconds, no one breathed. Aaliyah felt the floor tilt beneath her. She grabbed the edge of a nearby table to stay upright. Own the company, the entire chain, 17 locations across 3 cities, that couldn't be right. Billionaires didn't wash dishes undercover. Billionaires didn't eat cold omelets in hoodies while watching minimum wage workers get screamed at. But he was still speaking. "I came here yesterday under a different name and in different clothes. I wanted to see how this restaurant actually operated when no one thought the owner was watching." He paused, letting the sentence settle. "What I witnessed was unacceptable, on every level." He turned his gaze directly to Aaliyah. Her breath caught, every pair of eyes in the room followed his, pinning her in place. She wanted to disappear into the floor. "Yesterday," Daniel continued, his tone softening just a fraction, "you were forced to continue working with a broken finger. You were threatened, intimidated, told that if you left your shift early, you would be replaced before the lunch rush even started. You were denied a break, denied medical attention, and told, loudly and in front of customers, that you were replaceable." Aaliyah's throat closed. She hadn't told anyone the exact words. She hadn't told anyone anything, yet he repeated them almost verbatim. Daniel's eyes never left hers. "You shouldn't have had to endure that, not for 1 second." He turned then, slowly, to face Mr. Farouk. The manager looked like he might vomit. Sweat glistened along his hairline. His mouth opened and closed several times, but no sound came out. "You," Daniel said quietly, "are terminated, effective immediately." 2 security officers Aaliyah hadn't even noticed stepped forward from the entrance. They wore plain black polos, no logos, no weapons visible, but their presence was unmistakable. One of them moved to Mr. Farouk's elbow with practiced calm. "Sir, if you'll come with us." Farouk's voice finally cracked through. This is insane. You can't just, you have no proof." "I have 16 hours of covert video and audio," Daniel said evenly. "I have statements already collected from 3 other employees who witnessed the same pattern of behavior over the past 6 months, and I have my own eyes and ears. That is more than sufficient." Farouk's face crumpled. He looked suddenly much older than his 47 years. "I've been here 11 years, he whispered. "I built this place." "You built a culture of fear," Daniel replied, "and it ends today." The security officers guided him toward the door. No one tried to stop them. No one even moved. Farouk's clipboard still lay abandoned on the floor like a fallen flag. When the doors closed behind him, the silence returned, thicker, heavier. Daniel faced the group again. His posture remained calm, but there was steel beneath it now. "An independent investigation begins today. External auditors, HR specialists, and legal counsel will be on site within the next 48 hours. Every employee will be interviewed privately and confidentially. Any attempt to retaliate against staff, any phone calls, any messages, any threats, will be treated as witness tampering and will result in immediate legal action. He let that sink in. I know many of you are scared right now. You're wondering if your jobs are safe. I want to be very clear. No one is being fired because they spoke up, because they made a mistake, or because they were too afraid to say no yesterday. The only people at risk are those who actively participated in creating or enforcing this environment. He paused again, scanning faces. I'm not here to destroy this company, I'm here to fix it. But I can't do that alone. I need to hear the truth from all of you, anonymously if necessary. There will be multiple channels for reporting, a dedicated hotline, a secure email, even physical suggestion boxes starting tomorrow morning. No question is off limits, no concern is too small. Aaliyah's knees trembled. She locked them in place, afraid she might actually collapse. Her injured hand pulsed in time with her heartbeat. Daniel's gaze returned to her, gentler this time. Aaliyah, I've already arranged for you to see an orthopedic specialist this morning. A car will be waiting outside in 10 minutes. Paid leave starts today. No questions, no docked pay. Your job will be here when you're ready to return. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Tears burned behind her eyes. She hadn't cried yesterday, not in front of Farouk, not in front of the customers, but now the dam was cracking. Daniel addressed the room one last time. I know trust is broken, words are cheap, so I'm going to prove it with actions. Starting next week, every location in the chain will have mandatory rest, breaks enforced by timer systems, immediate medical leave for injuries, no clearance from management required, a zero-tolerance policy for harassment, intimidation, or retaliation, with independent oversight, a wage review for all front-of-house and back-of-house staff. A few people exchanged glances. Someone near the bar let out a shaky breath that was almost a sob. Daniel gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. I'll be here all day. My office is temporarily set up in the back banquet room. If anyone wants to speak to me, privately or with a colleague, my door is open. No judgment, no repercussions. He looked around once more, meeting as many eyes as he could. Thank you for coming in early. You're dismissed for the rest of the day. Paid. I'll send updates by group message and email before end of day. No one moved at first. Then slowly people began to shuffle toward the exit, some dazed, some crying quietly, some holding hands. Aaliyah stayed rooted to the spot. Daniel walked over to her. Up close she could see faint shadows under his eyes. The hoodie had hidden them yesterday. He didn't look like a billionaire now, just a tired man who had seen too much. Are you okay to walk outside? He asked gently. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He didn't touch her, didn't crowd her, just walked beside her toward the door. The black SUV waited at the curb, engine already running. A driver in a plain suit held the rear door open. Daniel stopped just short of the vehicle. When you're ready, he said, come back, not because you have to, because you want to. We're going to make this place what it should have been all along. Looked up at him, really looked. For the first time in months, she didn't feel small. She managed a tiny, trembling smile. Thank you, she whispered. Daniel inclined his head. Then he turned and walked back inside to face the rest of the broken team he had inherited. Aaliyah slid into the back seat. The door closed with a soft click. As the car pulled away from the curb, she leaned her forehead against the cool window and let the tears come at last. For the first time in a long time, they didn't taste like defeat, they tasted like relief. The private clinic smelled of fresh linen and faint eucalyptus. No fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, no cracked vinyl chairs, no 6-month-old magazines with missing pages. Just quiet music, soft leather seats, and a receptionist who smiled like she actually meant it. Aaliyah sat in the examination room, still wearing her uniform pants and a borrowed clinic gown over her polo. The orthopedic specialist, an older woman with silver hair pulled into a neat bun, examined the x-rays with calm focus. Clean break through the proximal phalanx, she said, tapping the film. No displacement, you're lucky. 6 weeks in a proper splint, then light physical therapy. No permanent damage if you rest it now. Aaliyah nodded mutely. Rest. The word felt foreign. When she stepped out into the waiting area 40 minutes later, the driver was still there, phone in hand. He stood as soon as he saw her. "Mr. Carter asked me to take you wherever you need to go next," he said. "Home, school, anywhere." She hesitated. I have class tonight, virtual, but I can do it from my apartment." He nodded without judgment. "Then home it is." The drive through Karachi's late-morning traffic felt surreal. Horns blared outside the tinted windows, but inside the car it was cool and quiet. Aaliyah stared at the splint on her right hand, rigid, padded, professionally applied. For the first time in days, the pain was dull instead of screaming. She didn't notice the text message until the car stopped outside her building. From unknown number. Subject, meeting request, Daniel Carter. "Aaliyah, when you're settled and feel up to it, I'd like to speak with you privately. No pressure on timing. The car can bring you to the restaurant tomorrow afternoon if that works, or we can do a video call, whatever is easiest." "DC." She read it twice, thumb hovering over the screen. Then she typed back with her left hand, slowly. "Tomorrow afternoon is fine, thank you." The reply came almost instantly. "See you then, rest well tonight." She climbed the 4 flights of stairs, one careful step at a time, and let herself into the small one-room apartment she shared with no one. The single bed was still unmade from the night before. Textbooks and a battered laptop sat on the tiny folding table she used as a desk. A half-finished cup of chai from yesterday morning stood cold beside them. She sank onto the bed, cradling her splintered hand, and for a long moment just breathed. The next afternoon she arrived at the restaurant just after 2 p.m. The closed sign still hung on the door, but the lights were on inside. The same 2 security officers from yesterday nodded politely and let her in. Daniel was waiting in the small banquet room at the back. No suit today, just dark jeans, a plain navy sweater, sleeves pushed to the elbows. He stood when she entered. "Aaliyah," he said, voice gentle, "how's the hand?" "Better, they gave me a real splint, and painkillers that actually work." "Good," he gestured to the chair opposite him. A pot of tea and 2 cups waited on the table. "Please." She sat. He poured tea for both of them without asking if she wanted any. The gesture felt oddly intimate, not in a romantic way, but in the way someone acknowledges that another person has been running on empty for too long. "I've spent the last 24 hours reviewing personnel files, shift logs, customer comment cards, and training records," he began. "I wasn't looking for anything in particular, I just wanted the full picture." He slid a slim folder toward her. She opened it with her good hand. The first page was her own employee profile. Start date 14 months ago. Position server/hostess/backup expo. Average customer satisfaction score 4.92/5 based on 187 reviews. Comments last 6 months. "Aaliyah is the reason we keep coming back. So kind even when it's busy. She remembered my daughter's allergy without me saying anything. Best server we've ever had." She turned the page. Online education verification form, submitted 6 months earlier. Program, BBA, Bachelor of Business Administration, Virtual University. Status, enrolled, perfect attendance, 3.89 GPA. Another page, training log. Aaliyah had onboarded and mentored 3 new hires in the past year. Each received glowing feedback from the trainees themselves. None of the sessions were compensated beyond her regular hourly rate. Daniel watched her face as she read. "You never asked for a raise," he said quietly. "Not once, even after training new people, even after consistently being the top-rated server in the building." She closed the folder. "I needed the job more than I needed to ask." "I know," he leaned forward slightly, "but that doesn't make it right." Silence stretched between them. "I've decided to create a new position," he said at last. "Employee advocate and training supervisor. It would report directly to me and the new regional HR director we're hiring. Responsibilities include mentoring new staff, creating fair training programs, being the first point of contact for any workplace concerns, conducting monthly listening sessions with employees, and helping design better policies. Full benefits, health insurance, paid leave, provident fund contribution, education stipend. Starting salary 40% higher than your current rate, with performance reviews every 6 months. Hours are flexible, so you can continue your degree. Aaliyah stared at him. I don't have a degree yet, she whispered. You're 6 months from finishing with honors, he countered, and you've already proven you can lead people better than most managers I've met. Tears welled up before she could stop them. She tried to blink them away, but they spilled over anyway. Why me? She asked, voice cracking. There are so many others who have suffered here longer. Because you never let it turn you cruel, Daniel said simply. You protected the new hires. You smiled at customers even when your hand was broken. You kept showing up. That kind of strength isn't common, and I want it protecting the people who work here, not buried under someone else's mistakes. She covered her mouth with her good hand, trying to hold the sob inside. Daniel pushed a box of tissues across the table. She took one, then another. When she could speak again, her voice was small but steady. I accept. He smiled, small, real, relieved. Good. Months passed in a blur of change. The restaurant reopened under new management. New timers appeared above the break room door. A bright red phone was installed next to the time clock, labeled simply Employee Support Hotline 24/7. Suggestion boxes were bolted to the wall in every location. Wages rose across the board. Turnover dropped by 62% in the first quarter. Aaliyah's hand healed completely. The scar across her knuckle was thin and pale now, a faint reminder rather than a daily torment. She finished her degree on a humid August evening, walking across the virtual stage in a rented black gown while her mother cried on the phone from their village. Daniel sent flowers, simple white lilies, and a handwritten note. You earned this. Proud of you. They say. On her first day as employee advocate, she stood at the front of the training room wearing a navy blazer she'd bought herself. 20 new hires watched her with wide eyes. My name is Aaliyah, she began. I started here as a server, just like most of you will. I know what it feels like to be afraid to speak up. I know what it feels like when the system seems designed to break you. She lifted her right hand, showing the faint scar. I broke 2 fingers once and was told to keep working. I didn't report it because I was scared of losing my job. That will never happen here again, not while I'm in this role. She looked around the room, meeting every pair of eyes. You are not replaceable. Your safety, your health, your dignity, they matter. If something feels wrong, tell me, anonymously if you want. I will listen. I will act. Later that evening, she walked through the dining room during the dinner rush. A young hostess, barely 19, was struggling to balance trays and greet guests at the same time. Aaliyah stepped in quietly, took one tray, and showed her how to position her feet so her back wouldn't ache by the end of the night. The girl whispered, "Thank you." Aaliyah smiled, "You're welcome, and if anyone ever tells you that you can't take a break, come find me." She moved through the restaurant like a quiet current, correcting gently, encouraging firmly, protecting without fanfare. Daniel watched from the bar one evening, nursing a black coffee. He had come looking for problems, for negligence, for rot. What he found instead was something far rarer, a woman who had every reason to break, and chose, day after day, not to. That discovery shocked him more than any spreadsheet of misconduct ever could, because strength like hers didn't just survive broken systems, it quietly rebuilt them.